everyone, it's Sleepy Reader, aka Damien, and I'm here with another comic book countdown, and other stuff, like a haul. I'm gonna do a countdown from 7 down to 1 on the 7 comics I got picked up at the shop, new comics, on Wednesday, August 10th. And I'm going to continue the format I tried out last week, which is I will do a quick countdown of the books, and then I will flip the camera around and take a deeper look inside the comics and give you some more thoughts. And the idea there is, well, mostly just to change things up, but also maybe it'll be handy to some people who don't want to be spoiled, like they want to sort of know how I rank things, but they don't want me to go in depth or show too much art. So I'll put in a time notation below so that you could skip that part. And then afterwards, I'll turn the camera back around to me, and I will talk about a few other old comics I read and show a bit of a haul, some trades, and some back issues that I picked up recently. So for George, I am drinking a nitro oat milk Earl Grey tea. Anything with nitro in it, I'll drink, I guess. Got my my T-shirt from Casually Comics, from Comics Will Break Your Heart. It's kind of a cool, unique T-shirt, to say the least. So, in at number 7 for me was issue number 2 of Peter Milligan and Diodato's comic book Absolution. And this was the only comic that I found a bit of a chore to read this week, so I'm taking this off my pull. I will stick with Milligan's other AWA book, Sacrament, which I enjoyed a lot more. In at number 6 is X-Men Legends, and this one was a lot of fun to read, and just a little lower on the list because it kind of dragged a little bit near the end. But really great to see Roy Thomas back in the saddle, writing some X-Men characters, some Hulk dialogue that was a lot of fun, etc. Samurai Doggy, number 1. This is in at number 5 for me. I enjoyed it. It just didn't totally click with me. It's about a dog in the future or some weird world who's a samurai. I'll talk more about that later, I guess. And in at number 4, Archer and Armstrong. I just learned on Twitter from Robbie that that this is probably the last issue of Archer and Armstrong, which is too bad. They even, I think, show a cover of the next issue here. So when they put this together, they didn't know it was canceled. Yeah, there's a cover in there. I'll show it when I flip the camera around. I found it pretty satisfying end to the arc, but left me looking forward to the next story. But there you go. That's comics. In at number 3, the wild and crazy 8 billion genies thing seemed, I don't know. It seemed like this issue took a little bit of a different turn, and maybe because of that I didn't enjoy it quite as much. Anyway, I enjoyed it a lot, though, so I put it at number 3. But I enjoyed even more Jane Foster and the Mighty Thor, number 3, written by Torrin Grunbeck, art by Michael Dowling, and also, just as important, color artist Jesus Abertoff. This was a fun comic book, and so I enjoyed it. To be fair, more than I expected to. I almost didn't purchase this. And then, in at number 1, A Town Called Terror. This is issue number 5. I guess there's one more issue to go. I'm hoping it's just the end of an arc, and we'll get more of A Town Called Terror, because I'm really loving this. So there you are. Before I turn the camera around, I just remembered I also wanted to shout out Taqi. I'll put a link to his channel down below. I've really been getting into his videos, and I hope some other people will check it out. Okay, time to flip the camera around. So my number 7 book, Absolution, just maybe seemed too kind of one note, grim world of criminals who deserve to die, and by the whole setup that we got in issue 1 just seemed to be this. Everything that was going on in issue 2 was just more of the same, and it just wasn't enough for me. Maybe it felt a little tacky and exploitive to me in a way that, I don't know, just turned me off slightly. And the focus on the violence, even though it's kind of like an anti-violence thing, and with against the online encouragement of violence and everything, it just, I don't know, it just hit me the wrong way. I think also, although at times I have liked Diodato's way of playing with the page with these panels, they just, I don't know, they started to not work for me or work against the story for me at times. I think he's overplayed his way of doing it. I did love the color in here. I find that I always like color done by Lee Lowridge. And it's not a bad book at all. It just sort of hit me the wrong way. I could imagine coming back and reading the rest of it, maybe digitally or something like that. But for now, I've had enough. X-Men Legends. I was all excited to see Roy Thomas come back, and I was not disappointed. I was nervous when I saw this cover. I do not like that cover. It is by Kari Andrews, whose art I usually like quite a bit, actually, but it just didn't work for me. And then I thought, oh no, this looks a little odd. But the art actually worked out very well. Some great fight scenes between Wolverine and the Hulk. And unlike some of the modern Marvel comics that I complain about, the fight scene was done very well, choreographed, and everything was logical, and you could follow the action. And I really enjoyed this old school Hulk, and Roy Thomas really handled that well. What happened towards the end of the book perhaps was too much kind of, I don't know. It wasn't bad at all, but it was a lot of Wolverine talking with this guy who's his commander or whatever, his handler. And then this diamond guy showing up who was kind of annoying to me. But still overall a good book, and I will probably, depending on how big my haul is the day the next issue comes out, I'll probably pick this up. But it's a decent superhero comic, and maybe superhero, given how long I've been reading superhero comics, I'm not always easy to please. And so it did a pretty good job within its little genre nook. As I said before, Samurai Doggy, I was having trouble second reading that Samurai there. Samurai Doggy was like a cross between Usagi Yojimbo and Samurai Jack. And the writer has worked in Hollywood and has worked in animation. The artist on this has worked in comics, but also has worked in storyboards. What is nice, because it's not always true for an Aftershock book, is that the copyright is owned by both the artist and the writer. But I did sort of feel like in their minds, probably the highest use for this would to become a TV show. I could be wrong. The coloring is really nice, which I think it's a one-man show on the art. Santos did his own coloring, and that's the name of the artist. And I really appreciated that. It did have fight scenes where I couldn't always tell what was going on. In fact, the story, after the sort of intro about some evil stranger who kills the dog's mother, the story then plunges into a big fight scene in which I couldn't tell much of what was going on in terms of who was hitting who or what its effect was. And then we flash back to explain how we got into this big fight scene. And then the issue swings back around to the fight scene for the end. So we have to get to the next issue to find out how the fight scene went. There's really cool images here of this futuristic amusement park. And where this is all supposed to take place, I guess it's not that important. But I do get kind of curious. Are they thinking of it as science fiction or just an alternative world? There's interesting mixes of technology and the like, which I found interesting. I don't know. It just, maybe this dog who's after the mysterious stranger who killed his mother and kidnapped his siblings. I don't know. Maybe it just felt too familiar, but I like familiar seeming stories pretty often. But there's a cool double-page spread kind of showing the mixes of technology here. With pack animals in the street and these kind of golf cart type cars, and then an old-fashioned streetcar in the background. Anyway, it's an interesting book, but I don't know exactly why it didn't click with me. Archer and Armstrong, number 4. And when I say don't click with me, didn't click with me as much as the books above it. Because, as I say, everything except for Absolution was quite enjoyable. This one, the most fun thing about it is where a old nemesis of Archer's comes along who's a collector and who once collected, of Armstrong, not Archer. Armstrong being the big strong guy, who is immortal, once collected him as part of his rich man's collection of oddities. And we get a bit of a backstory of how it happened then. having Armstrong didn't mind being part of the collection as long as he had plenty to drink, and he kind of smashed up the rest of the collection, and the guy got rid of him. And we have a bunch of fighting and such with the cast of characters. I continue to enjoy the writing. The writing maybe slumped in issue 3, but really got good here in issue 4, and it was very funny and enjoyable. But the art still doesn't, it still seems just it's workable, but nothing to get excited about for these characters. But by the end, when they wrapped up the whole story about this sort of search for immortality that they've been on since issue 1, I thought it was a very good wrap up, which leads very nicely into the next promised story elements. So there's the cover for the next issue, which I guess apparently is not going to happen. I think Valiant is flailing as business-wise as a company, and I heard on the Publishers Weekly podcast about comics that they have now announced they're just going to put out one single comic per month. So that's interesting how they'll do that. Just one title, or will they go like every other month a different title? So we'll see there. I don't know if I'll be picking up more Valiant or not. I kind of have always picked up Valiant just based on both creators and the characters. If there's a creator I like on a character I like, I'll pick it up. So I'm not that interested in their Bloodshot characters, so I haven't really picked up many of those. But I always pick up all the Archer and Armstrong. If Exo Man of War is being done by creators that I like, I'll pick that up. And so forth. Love this cover for 8 Billion Genies. Mostly love the genie part of it, I guess. The story is progressing. The pattern that they used for setting up each issue changed a bit in this issue. And some of the revelations, which I won't give away here, kind of changed things up too, and twist things in a direction that I was not expecting, and I'm not sure yet if they'll make good use of that twist. Meanwhile, there was a kind of a play on the concept of superheroes in this issue, which perhaps was less interesting. I'm liking this a lot. So when I say less interesting, I just mean less than other issues. But because deconstructions of superheroes are so familiar, right? It just had less novelty, although it was done well and some good points were made about superheroes. And I like who it turns out all these superheroes are. And not the whole issue is superheroes. We also do spend some time at our bar. And my favorite scenes are always in the bar. But the revelations that we get eventually do sort of change our view of that bar. So anyway, 8 Billion Genies still is one of the strongest books out there, and certainly incredibly unique. And yeah, ugly, ugly colors. Much prettier colors and pretty art all around in Jane Foster and the Mighty Thor, which I guess the Mighty Thor does kind of show up in this issue. But it's still almost all Jane Foster, plus Valkyrie, plus Sif, who is now in Heimdall's role. I don't know what you call it, the all-seeing god who guards the Rainbow Bridge, all involved in this giant. It's an action-packed issue, but Thorin, the writer, balances out all the action so that it doesn't feel like just a bunch of action gobbledygook. It all has drama and excitement. And a lot of that, I suppose, goes to the artist. I don't like how thin Volstagg is. He was supposed to be godlike in his proportions of fatness. Just like in Archer and Armstrong, they have now made Armstrong too thin. He's supposed to be much more portly too. I'm not sure. Is this the year of turning portly characters thin? I don't know what. Probably not a pattern there. But there is this, now that I think about it, there's quite a similarity between Archer and Volstagg. They are the partying characters, and they are both, in a sense, based on that famous Shakespeare character, Falstaff, I would say. They're both Falstaffian characters. But we only got a teeny bit of Volstagg there. It'd be fun to get and maybe it's been done, a couple of times, but a Volstagg comic, a mini-series by a talented comedic writer. That would be really cool. One that still loves the Norse mythology. The colors are really nice here. This is the kind of comic where the colorist is 50% of the art is color. But it's a good team up between this artist and this colorist, I think, for the heavy-handed kind of color that Marvel likes. It still reads well. The color does not interfere, and it at times looks quite beautiful. Although I'm still mostly on the side of fairly much simpler color, or much, color that's not so much in your face with its dark shades. Anyway, I don't know why I got to constantly pick on things. A really fun comic book, and I'm glad I stayed with it. And there's not many Marvel comics that I can say that about. So yeah, this will be good in a trade or good to read digitally if you're not following individual issues. And Marvel comics, if you're like on Marvel Unlimited, pop up really quickly on the digital. So, and probably that color will probably look even more beautiful digitally. I don't think A Town Called Terror would be much good digitally. This was my number one book of this week with not too many comics. I think a lot of my liking for this issue is in the build-up. It's not like this issue by itself is number one, but the whole 5 issues led to my very strong enjoyment of reading this. And as been said, I think by Nick at Comic Culture that this makes a lot of sense as a trade read. So I would definitely, if you aren't already reading it, I would definitely say wait for the trade, which should be coming up in another issue or so. But everything's coming together. It's setting up very nicely for the final issue. It's makes a little more sense of everything we've seen in the previous issues. So everything is clicking. And the art, this is art that I think I wouldn't like on a lot of comics, but works really well for the particular mood and tone of this comic. So just kind of a pleasure, a horror comic that's really working. It'll be interesting to see if it does continue beyond this first arc, and see what people think of it when they read it in a trade. If they have the reaction I'm having reading individual issues, and and all the while thinking, oh, this should be in a trade. Anyway, so it was a lot of fun. You got to accept a very decompressed story with all these huge pages, but they seem appropriate. This is an artist writer team who knows how to do one of these deconstructed stories right, and get the pacing and everything just right. Hey, so I also read Chamber of Darkness, issue number 2. You saw some Chamber of Darkness in my haul last week, and I got around to reading one of the issues. It was fun and kind of silly. There's this first story in here with art by Marie Severin and inks by Trimpe and Sutton, was scripted by Roy Thomas and Neil Adams. Or I should say Neil Adams and Roy Thomas, because Neil's comes first. It's a pretty standard kind of story, but it made me think about how Neil Adams was maybe thinking about doing more. I mean, no, he did some of his own writing, like on Dead Man and stuff, and maybe he was thinking of moving into being a writer more before he went off to greener pastures in general. And then the second story is an odd one, but who wrote it? Archie Goodwin, but interesting art by Sid Shores, who I know mostly as an inker. He did the drawing and the inking, the pencils and the inking here, and it was quite an interesting look. Kind of just an odd story about this this face haunting him in the mirror. That actually, I don't want to spoil it, but it works out differently than he thought it would. And then finally, the most kind of interesting thing here is a story narrated by Stan Lee, but it's not actually written by Stan Lee. So it's Roy Thomas writing Stan Lee into the story. Stan Lee's like the Crypt Keeper or something. He's the narrator. And it's the Day of the Red Death. I guess to sound like one of those science fiction movies, like The Day of the Triffids or something. But it's a kind of a science fiction adaptation of The Mask of the Red Death, which is one of my favorite Edgar Allan Poe stories. And I love the Vincent Price movie adaptation of it. There's also a really cool science fiction adaptation, part of the Berserker series by Fred Saberhagen. It's one of his short stories in that series called The Mask of the Red Shift, because there's the red shift in physics where the light gets shifted red, and it's a decadent party that takes place near the edge of a black hole, near the event horizon of a black hole, and then a killing machine berserker shows up, and chaos ensues. In this case, it's an industrialist and his friends partying away in their bunker after a major ecological disaster, perhaps caused by his own chemical experiments. And then, of course, everything goes bad with the mask when the Red Death shows up. And Stan Lee shows up at the end to explain how the world really didn't end and that kind of thing. So that was my favorite story in there. They should have just made Stan Lee the host of all of these stories. I think that would have been cool. And then last week in my haul, I showed this 3-issue series called Dreamtime, and I've managed so far they're very dense. So I've read, and a little on the what's the right word? A little bit on the slightly depressing side, I guess, or just it's not all depression, but it's a very interesting, detailed, evoked sort of little story, if you will, in the midst of the Middle Ages, with war going on in the background and people suffering from different kinds of woes and bad luck in life. But it all takes place in this village with a small cast of characters, and it's extremely well done. It's by this what country is he from? Danish or Norwegian cartoonist who had a European comic strip but lived in New York City, Heinrich Rare. Now, there might be... It was kind of odd because the credits, there is no credits, but then in the notes in the second issue, they mentioned 3 people will be at the San Diego Comic-Con in 1995. So I don't know if that's the editors, if the other people are editors or other people involved in the creation of this comic. The big mystery of Dreamtime is, why is it called Dreamtime? It's very reality driven so far. There's one character who may have kind of a slightly supernatural or parascientific kind of ability, but other than that, it feels pretty rooted in the real world of the Middle Ages, to the extent that we know what real life in the Middle Ages would have been like. Completely unrooted with anything like reality, but I greatly enjoyed Tales to Demolish, another Eric Haven book. I think I talked about an Eric Haven book last week or the week before, and this one, I think, what's the copyright date on it? 2006, so it's a little bit older than the other one I read. It exhibits the same kind of interesting sense of humor and combination of kind of surrealness and pulp sensibilities and just kind of just kind of a wacky underground kind of feel. I really enjoyed it. And I think I don't know if I had a favorite one, actually. Here's one at the back that seems a little more autobiographical, not completely though, and a lot more wordy. Most of the time he's not very wordy. So I'm really growing to be more and more of an Eric Haven fan. I think I'm going to reread the other books of his that I already have. And I think I've ordered some other collection by him from somewhere. Can't remember now. So on to a bit of a haul. At my comic book shop this week, I picked up the latest Elric from the Michael Moorcock library. It's on. I like the paper it's on, but I'm not sure about the reproduction, if it's of the highest quality or more. I don't know. I gotta see about that. Good binding and everything. Maybe it's just in the nature of the coloring, but it almost looks like a color Xerox at times to me. This is the first time I've really looked inside, to tell you the truth. I got a pile of books and I put it aside. So yeah, they're trying out different ways of coloring comics, I guess, when these originally were published. What volume? It doesn't say. Oh, this is volume 6 in the Elric, or in the, I guess in the Elric series. Although it's all part of the Michael Moorcock library. I probably should have looked inside of that before I bought it. Okay, and then I did look inside this and decided to buy it just because I liked the look of the art and I liked the title, The God Network. That's really cool, this upside down futuristic city, and then below this guy riding on what looks like a dinosaur. So it looks like a fun, imaginative, European-style comic album. Or I wonder if this is several albums put together into one collection, because it's a bit thicker than a normal European comic album would be, I think. And I'm not sure what language it originally came in. It's definitely in translation. Probably was originally in French. Vincent Pirot is the writer-artist, and the colorist is Florence Breton. Translator Montana Kane. And this is, I don't know, it says it's Statics Press, and then it also says it's a Titan book. So I guess is Statics Press a imprint of Titan that I was not aware of before? Titan and Humanoids and Magnetic Press seem to be the main people putting out books in translation from Europe lately. Okay, my most exciting thing that I got this week, which I bought directly from the writer, the auteur, because it's a cartoonist, I guess. I don't like the term cartoonist. It's a cartoonist who has self-published this collection of his 8 out-of-print issues of Cankor. And you can see I'm a little less than halfway through. The art is amazing. The story is perhaps impenetrable. There's a cool video from Ray Carcase about it already out there, and he was pretty frustrated by it. But like he said, it's a really nice production. And for me, it's definitely worth it, whether or not I understand the story. I feel like at times I grok the story. I get into the dreamlike mode of it. But in a way, I'm thinking it doesn't tell you where the 8 parts are. I'm thinking if I read this in individual comics, it might have more impact, because you keep reading. It's kind of compelling because you're in this dreamlike state, but you keep reading it, and eventually it becomes kind of too much. Like you need a break from it. It's too much. I don't want to say random, but almost like stream of consciousness of imagination, where one image kind of leads you into another. But such powerful images, and beautifully, beautifully rendered images, with that sense of both a kind of dreamlike love of old superhero comics, but drawn nothing like an old superhero comic, if that makes sense. And the coloring, I just love the coloring in here. I wish the comic book companies, the main ones, would take a look at books like this and say, how come our colorists aren't doing stuff more like this? So very tasty. A weird thing about this cartoonist, Matthew Allison, is he never puts noses on his characters. It's a very strange and disturbing effect. Anyhow, I'm excited to read more of that. I guess I just lost my place. Somewhere around there. And maybe I'll try and do a longer video on that if I end up loving it. Individual issues I picked up at the shop this week. The Do You Dare Enter the House of Mystery DC Super Giant, or Super DC Giant, I'm not sure which way you're supposed to read that, which I assume will be House of Mystery reprints. Got it at a nice price, and I just love getting all the House of Mysteries as long as I can afford them. And also at a nice price, and filling out a collection. It turned out I only had issue 2, 3, and 4 of Justice Machine, or Justice Inc. So now I have issue 1, which has a Joe Kubert cover, but it's not Joe Kubert on the inside. I looked at the credits. It's a artist whose name was almost familiar, Al McWilliams. Where have I seen Al McWilliams before? I'm not sure. I wish it was Joe Kubert inside. The second cover is by Jack Kirby, and it is awesome. And even more awesome, because interiors are more important than covers, Jack Kirby on the inside. So I'm really happy to have that. I'll have to dig up my other 2 issues of Justice Inc., not Justice Machine, that's another comic, and try reading it all together and see what I make of it. I don't think it's written by Jack Kirby, which is probably... It's written by Denny O'Neil as an adaptation of a Kenneth Robeson novel. It's probably at the point where Kirby's contract with DC was winding down, and they knew they weren't going to renew it, or he knew that... And so he wasn't really doing his own important material anymore, and so they just threw him on this to fill out a few issues. But, yeah. I'm interested in, if I read this, about the novel that it was adapted from. Okay, and then completely different, well, kind of like the Cankor, but what's the name of the press? The Last Gasp press, which I didn't know still even existed, was having a warehouse sale. I think it was 50% off, or was it 25% off? Anyway, it was a good chunk off, and someone on Twitter, I want to say it, I'm not sure who it was who alerted me to this on Twitter. So I just grabbed some stuff from their online catalog of stuff that was on sale. I had always meant to get this anthology called Slow Death Zero that they came out with a few years ago. That was kind of like even though it's called Zero, like a final slow death after the slow death of the actual magazine. They put out an anthology. So I'm eager to dig through that. Such a wide variety of art styles in there. And then they had all these just old Last Gasp comics from who knows when, just sitting around their warehouse, I guess. So this is Skull number 4. I feel like, is that a Corbin image, or it's like a Corbin image? That creature, like a really old Corbin. And there's no Corbin in here. Anyway, I remember picking up an issue or two of Skull back in 1980 or so when I discovered a head shop that had old underground comics. A lot of them would get reprinted frequently. So they might have still been reprinting them in the 80s. I don't know if this says on it what edition this is. I don't see anything. It was originally published in 1972. I don't know if this is the 1972 print, though. Let's see, what else have we got in here? And this one is not signed. This looks like Jackson, also known as Jack Jackson. Is it signed anywhere? I don't see. So that's Skull. Subvert Comics. Got some Trash Man. Is this going to be all Trash Man? Is this all Spain Rodriguez? I have a Trash Man collection, so I don't know if this will also be in it, but it seemed like it would be fun to have some individual issues of Trash Man. And Zap, number 7. When did this come out? 1974. I don't know if there'll be any R. Crumb in here at all, though, even though Zap originally... Oh, yep, there is. Even though Zap was originally, I believe, founded by R. Crumb. You can tell me if I'm wrong on that. So, yeah, I went through this phase in maybe 80 to 84 where I bought a lot of undergrounds and don't have any of them anymore. I guess here's an autobio comic. But, and I just don't think about undergrounds very much anymore, except when, like, Comic Crack brings them up. But it seems fun to get some. Oh, this looks like, what's his name? S. Clay Wilson, maybe? Okay. Another Zap, much later, Zap 15. I didn't know Zap went that long, to tell you the truth. Got some Wonder Warthog. 2004 is the cover date. The cover has a date on it, 2004. Oh, it's a flip book. Interesting. I like that cover. Flip. Flip. Oh, and there's some later Crumb in here. Are there people who prefer the later Crumb style? Well, that looks intense. And then Mr. A, I guess, was an issue or two of Mr. A was published by Last Gasp. I had no idea, or maybe they just had some copies. Maybe they were distributing Mr. A. This is Mr. A number 4, or Ditko number 4. No, it says Mr. A number 2. Okay, so I don't know why it says D4 there. I believe I have an original Mr. A number 1 that was it original? Sent to me by Gore Vidal so many years ago. And then I also have a modified reprint of it that Ditko put out from his own company in more recent years. The art in here looks fantastic. Mr. A, in the reading I've done of Mr. A, is very one note. But I'm not going to say no to any Ditko. And an issue of Slow Death, the environmental underground comic, number 11. So this is later in the Slow Death from 1992. Oh, script by Alan Moore, art by Brian Talbot. I did not know Alan Moore dipped his toes into the Slow Death verse. If they advertise that more. Wow, okay. This is a little much. You got your reading glasses on? Okay, that's the whole haul. Goofy video, it feels like to me now at this point. Hope you guys all are having a good time. I have a video coming up in a few days where I chat with Anshuman from For the Love of Comics, where we talk about sort of the beginnings of our reading habit, and the conversation spins off in a bunch of different ways. It was really a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I didn't have my best microphone, but I think it'll be an okay listen. And I'll be back with you with maybe another haul pretty soon. Talk to all of you later.